On a stormy night, Claire Thompson and her young son Jake vanished without a trace, leaving Willow Creek haunted by silence and suspicion. Whispers of your Davis, an ominous figure lurking in the shadows, cast doubt on whether their disappearance was an accident at all. Years later, when Sheriff Tom Reynolds and Farmer Hank Miller unearthed Claire's journal and a box of secrets from the fields, the past finally began to speak. And just listen to how shocking the twist in this drama turned out to be, and why justice ultimately prevailed. The rain fell in sheets that night, a relentless curtain that obscured the world beyond the windshield. Claire Thompson squinted through the downpour, her heart racing as she navigated the winding country road. She had promised her son, 11-year-old Jake, a trip to the arcade in town, a reward for his excellent report card. It had been a tough year for them, a year marked by the shadows of loss and the struggle to rebuild their lives after the tragic death of Claire's husband. The arcade was a brief escape, a way to forget the pain, if only for a few hours. "Mom, can we go a little faster?" Jake's voice broke through her concentration, a mixture of excitement and impatience. "Just hold on, buddy. It's slippery out here," Claire replied, trying to keep her tone light despite the knot in her stomach. The rain had turned the road into a slick ribbon, and her hands gripped the steering wheel tightly. As they approached a particularly sharp turn, a flash of lightning illuminated the landscape, revealing a sudden obstacle in the road. A fallen tree branch lay across the pavement, and Claire's heart dropped as she slammed on the brakes. The car skidded, tires struggling for traction. "Hold on!" she yelled, bracing for impact. The world spun as the car careened off the road, crashing into the underbrush. The sound of metal crumpling and glass shattering echoed in her ears, drowning out Jake's terrified screams. Everything went dark. When Claire awoke, the rain had lessened to a drizzle, and the car lay on its side, partially submerged in mud. Panic surged through her as she turned her head, trying to find Jake. "Jake!" she called, her voice hoarse. "Jake, where are you?" Silence. Frantically, she unbuckled her seatbelt, the world spinning around her as she struggled to push against the car's weight. She climbed out through the shattered window, her heart pounding in her chest. The forest loomed around her, dark and foreboding, the sound of the rain fading into an eerie quiet. "Jake!" she shouted again, her voice cracking. She stumbled away from the car, calling his name until her throat burned. The woods seemed to swallow her words, and the growing dread in her chest felt like a stone. After what felt like hours of searching, Claire fell to her knees, the cold mud seeping through her clothes. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she screamed his name, desperation clawing at her insides. The rain began to pick up again, and with it came the chilling realization that they were alone, lost in the woods, and that she might never see her son again. 12 years later, the town of Willow Creek had largely moved on from the tragedy, but the memories lingered. Claire's disappearance had become a local legend, a whispered tale of a mother and son who vanished without a trace. The search efforts had been extensive, but the dense woods and relentless rain had conspired against them. Claire Thompson and her son Jake were simply gone. To the townsfolk, it was as if they had evaporated into thin air. Some believed they were victims of foul play, while others thought they had run away, leaving behind a life too painful to bear. But the truth was buried deeper than anyone could imagine. On a cool autumn day, a farmer named Hank Miller plowed his field on the outskirts of town. He was a hard man, weathered by years of labor and loss, but he found solace in the rhythm of the land. As he drove his tractor through the soil, he noticed something unusual, a glimmer of white peeking through the earth. Curiosity piqued, Hank stopped the tractor and hopped down to inspect. As he approached, his heart sank. It was a piece of clothing, tattered and stained, but unmistakably human. He knelt down, heart racing, and began to dig. What he unearthed sent chills down his spine. A small, weathered backpack appeared first, followed by a child's shoe. Panic gripped him as he continued to dig, the realization dawning on him that he had stumbled upon something far more sinister than lost belongings. When the sheriff arrived, the atmosphere shifted from curiosity to dread. The discovery ignited the town's long-buried fears. The unresolved disappearance of Claire and Jake once again thrust into the spotlight. The sheriff, a young man named Tom Reynolds, had only been a boy when the Thompsons vanished, but he remembered the faces of the missing mother and son well. "Who would do this?" he murmured, turning to Hank, his voice barely above a whisper. "What happened to them?" "I don't know, Sheriff, but we need to find out," Hank replied, his face pale. "This isn't just any old search anymore. We owe it to them to find the truth." The sheriff nodded grimly, sensing the weight of the moment. They had been given a chance to finally uncover the secret that had haunted Willow Creek for over a decade. But as they began to piece together the evidence, they would soon learn that the truth was more twisted and dark than they could have ever imagined. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of crimson and gold, the first threads of a mysterious web began to unravel. Secrets that had been buried for over a decade would soon claw their way to the surface, revealing not just the fate of Claire and Jake, but also those who had hidden it. Little did they know that the answers they sought would bring more questions, and that the darkness that had claimed Claire and Jake would soon reach out to ensnare them all. The air was thick with anticipation as Sheriff Tom Reynolds stood in the field, the echoes of long-buried memories crashing against the present like waves against rocky shores. He squinted at the faded red shoe, half buried in the soil, its color muted by years of rain and rot. The sight sent a shiver down his spine, reminding him of that fateful day 12 years ago, when whispers of Claire and Jake Thompson's disappearance had sent ripples through Willow Creek. Now the remnants of their existence lay before him like a cruel puzzle waiting to be pieced together. Hank Miller knelt beside the shoe, his calloused hands trembling slightly as he brushed dirt from the leather. "I can't believe it," he murmured, his voice barely breaking the stillness of the afternoon. "I thought it was just a trick of the light when I saw it while plowing." Tom crouched beside him, his heart pounding in rhythmic sync with the gathering storm clouds above. "Did you find anything else?" he asked, scanning the surrounding area for any additional clue that could lead him closer to the truth. Hank shook his head, his brow furrowed in concentration. "Just the backpack. It was stuck in some brush over there." He gestured vaguely, the weight of the discovery hanging heavily between them. Tom stood and moved toward the tangle of underbrush, the damp earth squelching beneath his boots. As he reached the backpack, he hesitated, the air thickening with dread. He knelt to inspect it, his fingers trembling as he unzipped the faded fabric. Inside lay a collection of childlike trinkets, a worn-out action figure, crumpled candy wrappers, and a small notebook filled with scribbles. The last entry, written in jagged letters, sent a chill racing up his spine. "I can't wait to go to the arcade with Mom." The innocent excitement of that simple sentence cut through him like a knife. He closed the notebook with a sense of finality, the weight of the past settling over his shoulders like a shroud. He could almost hear Claire's laughter and Jake's bright, hopeful voice, memories that had faded but never truly disappeared. "What do you think happened to them, Tom?" Hank's voice broke through the fog of his thoughts, heavy with concern. Tom straightened, glancing back at the farmer. "I don't know, Hank, but whatever it is, we have to find out." The resolve in his voice surprised even him, a flicker of determination igniting as he contemplated the implications of this discovery. "We owe it to them. We owe it to the town." The two men stood in silence, the wind picking up, rustling the leaves of nearby trees as if nature itself were urging them on. Tom could feel the eyes of the town upon him, the weight of their expectations pressing down like the darkening sky. "Let's take this back to the station," he finally said, his voice steadying. "Get it in evidence and see what we can do to dig deeper. We need to find out if this was an accident or something more." Hank nodded, his expression a mix of relief and dread. "I'll help you, whatever it takes." As they drove back toward town, the rain began to fall, initially a soft patter against the windshield that quickly morphed into a torrential downpour. Tom's thoughts raced like the droplets cascading down the glass, a whirlwind of questions and theories. The rain seemed to wash away the years of silence that had surrounded Claire and Jake's disappearance, stirring up old ghosts and long-held fears among the townsfolk. When they arrived at the sheriff's station, the familiar scent of old wood and coffee greeted Tom, mixed with the faint hint of wet earth clinging to his clothes. He set the backpack down on his desk, the action both simple and monumental, a turning point that would draw the attention of the entire community once again. Can you run a background check on the items? Tom asked his deputy, Lisa, who was busy typing at her computer, her fingers flying across the keys. See if anything here has been reported missing. Sure thing, Sheriff, Lisa replied, her brow furrowing as she glanced at the backpack. Do you think it's really connected? Tom took a deep breath, the tension in his shoulders tightening. I don't know yet, but it's the only lead we have and I want to follow it. As the hours passed, the rain continued to lash against the windows, creating a rhythmic backdrop to the frantic energy in the station. Tom reviewed the old case files, each page a haunting reminder of a family lost to the shadows. He could almost hear the echoes of Claire's laughter, shadowed by the weight of sorrow that had settled over the town like a heavy fog. Sheriff, you've got to see this, Lisa called out, her voice breaking through his reverie. She gestured for him to come over, her expression a mix of excitement and concern. Tom approached, his heart racing as he leaned over her shoulder to look at the screen. What have you got? There's a missing persons report from around the same time as the Thompsons, she said, scrolling through the information. A couple with a young daughter. They vanished without a trace, too. It was just after the storm started that year. Tom felt a chill run down his spine. Do we have any leads on them? Not much, just a few sightings, but they were never confirmed. Lisa paused, her eyes narrowing as she studied the screen. But there's one thing that stands out. The last sighting was reported just a few miles from where Claire and Jake disappeared. Send me everything you can find on that case, Tom instructed, a sense of urgency taking hold of him. We might be looking at something bigger than we thought. As Lisa began compiling the information, Tom's mind raced with possibilities. Could the two cases be connected? Was there something sinister lurking beneath the surface of Willow Creek, hidden for years until now? He had a sinking feeling that the rain was only the beginning of a storm that would unveil truths best left buried. The evening wore on, the storm outside intensifying as if mirroring the growing tension within the station. Tom glanced out the window, the wind howling like a mournful ghost. He thought of Claire and Jake, their laughter drowned out by the relentless downpour. I'll be right back, Tom said to Lisa, his voice steady despite the turmoil within. He stepped outside into the rain, the cold water soaking through his clothes instantly. He could feel it in his bones, the sense that something was shifting, a dark presence awakening in the heart of Willow Creek. The town was quiet, the streets slick with rain, the air heavy with the scent of damp earth and impending change. Tom walked towards the woods bordering the field, the place where Claire and Jake had vanished. The trees loomed like sentinels, their branches swaying ominously in the wind. He could feel their eyes on him, judging, waiting. As he stepped closer to the edge of the forest, he caught sight of something glinting in the underbrush. His pulse quickened as he bent down, the rain pouring down his face, mingling with the cold sweat of realization. It was another shoe, this one larger, perhaps an adult size, its laces frayed and muddy. Tom's breath hitched in his throat. The implications were staggering. Could it belong to Claire or someone else entirely? The darkness of the woods drew him in, the shadows whispering secrets that had been buried for too long. He had to know the truth, no matter how terrifying it might be. With the rain pounding around him, he stepped forward, crossing the threshold into the unknown. The rain fell relentlessly, a steady drumbeat against the windshield of Sheriff Tom Reynolds' cruiser as he navigated the winding road back towards Hank Miller's farm. The memory of the second shoe, darkened and worn, lingered in his mind like the lingering scent of damp earth after a storm. It had been a mere footnote in the investigation 12 years ago, an inconspicuous item amidst an ocean of questions. Yet now it felt pivotal, a thread unraveling in a tapestry woven with sorrow and mystery. As he drove, the trees loomed like sentinels, their branches swaying under the weight of the downpour. The road twisted and turned, shrouded in mist that clung to the air, a reminder of the night Claire and Jake had vanished. Tom recalled the fear that gripped the town then, a fear that had morphed into an uncomfortable legend over the years. He could still hear the whispers of the townsfolk, their voices thick with speculation and sorrow. Hank's Field had become the epicenter of that legend, the place where hope and despair collided. Tom's heart raced as he thought of what lay ahead. The discovery of the backpack and shoe had shaken something deep within him, an urgency sparked by the need for closure. Not just for the Thompsons, but for the community that had never quite moved on. The cruiser rolled to a stop near the farmhouse, its headlights cutting through the sheets of rain. Tom stepped out, the cold droplets instantly soaking through his uniform. He pulled his jacket tighter around him, feeling the chill seep into his bones. The faint glow of light spilled from the farmhouse windows, a beacon of warmth in the oppressive darkness. Hank stood on the porch, his silhouette framed against the light, his expression unreadable. "Sheriff," Hank greeted, his voice steady despite the chaos of the storm. "Thanks for coming back so soon." Tom offered a nod, unable to form words as he approached. The weight of the discoveries pressed heavily on both men, an invisible burden they shared. "Did you find anything else?" he asked, his voice low, almost drowned out by the rain's persistent patter. Hank shook his head, his brow furrowed in thought. "No, just those items. But I've been thinking. Maybe we should look deeper. Maybe the area around where I found those things." Tom felt a flicker of hope. "That makes sense. We need to know if there's more." He glanced towards the field, its dark expanse illuminated by flashes of lightning in the distance. "It's going to be dangerous with this weather, but we can't let it keep us from searching." Together they trudged into the field, their boots squelching in the mud. The landscape, usually serene, felt foreboding under the relentless rain, each step echoing with the weight of the past. Tom tried to shake off the shadows in his mind, focusing instead on the task at hand. He could almost hear the laughter of Jake, the child's innocent joy contrasting sharply with the tension of the moment. "Right over here," Hank called, gesturing towards a small rise in the ground, where the earth had shifted slightly. "I found the backpack a few feet away from this spot. It's like something. Something might be buried here." Tom nodded, his heart racing. He could sense the gravity of the moment, the potential for revelation that hung in the air like the scent of rain-soaked soil. They began to dig, their hands moving swiftly through the mud, searching for something, anything that could lead them closer to the truth. Minutes turned into what felt like hours as they unearthed nothing but rocks and roots. The rain continued to fall, drenching them, but it was the weight of the unanswered questions that bore down heavier than the storm. Just as Tom was about to suggest taking a break, the tip of his shovel struck something solid. "Wait," he said, excitement surging through him. He dug carefully, the mud giving way to a hard surface. Hank knelt beside him, his eyes widening as they uncovered what appeared to be a wooden box, waterlogged and worn but intact. "What do you think it is?" Hank asked, his voice a mix of awe and trepidation. Tom wiped the mud from his brow, peering closer. "I don't know, but it could be important." He worked the shovel around the box, freeing it from the earth, and together they pulled it free, their hands trembling with anticipation. The box was small, about the size of a shoebox, its surface marred and aged. Tom brushed away the layers of mud, revealing a rusty latch that held it shut. He hesitated, a chill running down his spine. "Should we open it here?" he asked, glancing at Hank. "Yeah, we need to know," Hank replied, his voice resolute. With a deep breath, Tom unlatched the box, its creak echoing in the silence of the storm. He lifted the lid slowly, revealing the contents inside. A collection of items lay nestled within old photographs, a few pieces of jewelry, and a tattered journal. Each item felt heavy with history, a connection to the past that stirred something deep within Tom. He reached for the journal first, its pages weathered but readable. This could belong to Claire," he murmured, flipping through the entries. The handwriting was neat but shaky, each word filled with emotion. As he read, images of Claire's struggles, her fears, and her love for Jake spilled onto the pages. It was a glimpse into her mind, a window into the heart of a mother desperate to protect her child against the backdrop of an unfathomable tragedy. Hank leaned closer, scanning the entries. "What does it say?" Tom's brow furrowed as he read aloud, piecing together Claire's thoughts. "She talks about feeling lost, about the weight of grief. There's something here, a sense of foreboding. She mentions a drive on a rainy day, how she felt something was watching them." He paused, the hairs on the back of his neck standing on end. "It's like she knew something was wrong." A shiver ran through Hank. "That's not good. We need to get this to the sheriff's office. Let's see if there are any leads. Agreed, Tom said, carefully placing the journal back in the box. He picked up one of the photographs, a faded image of Claire and Jake smiling at the beach, sunlight dancing on their faces. It was a stark contrast to the dark reality that surrounded them now. The rain began to ease, a gentle drizzle replacing the downpour, as if the heavens were granting them a moment of clarity amidst the chaos. Tom felt a sense of urgency building within him. They had to follow this lead, to uncover the truth buried in the shadows of their town. Let's head back, Tom said, determination etched on his face. We need to analyze these items, see if they connect to anything in the records. As they made their way back to the cruiser, the weight of the box felt like a promise of answers yet to come. The storm had transformed, leaving behind a stillness that felt almost unnatural. The air was thick with unspoken words, the ground beneath them a silent witness to the secrets it had held for far too long. Once inside the cruiser, Tom turned the key in the ignition, the engine rumbling to life as the windshield wipers swept away the remnants of the storm. He glanced at Hank, who sat beside him, his eyes reflecting a mix of hope and dread. "Do you think we're close?" Hank asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know," Tom admitted, his grip tightening on the steering wheel. "But we have to keep digging, for Claire, for Jake, and for everyone in Willow Creek who needs closure." As they drove through the fading rain, the shadows of the trees stretched across the road, a reminder of the darkness that had lingered over the town for too long. The box of secrets lay between them, a bridge to the past that promised to unravel the mystery of the Thompsons' vanishing. A mystery that was no longer just a tale whispered in the dark, but a quest for truth, justice, and perhaps redemption. The sun had barely risen over Willow Creek, its weak rays struggling to pierce the thick haze that hung over the fields. Hank Miller stood beside the freshly dug hole in his field. The earth still turned dark and damp from the rain. He felt the weight of the wooden box he had unearthed resting heavily in his hands, as though it contained not just the belongings of Claire and Jake Thompson, but the collective grief of a community that had long since learned to live with loss. Sheriff Tom Reynolds arrived moments later, his boots squelching in the mud as he approached Hank. The sheriff's face was drawn tight with both determination and concern, a reflection of the many sleepless nights spent pondering the mystery that still enveloped the Thompsons' fate. "What did you find?" Tom asked, his voice low, eyeing the box with a mix of hope and trepidation. Hank set the box down on a patch of dry ground. "Some clothes, a few toys, and this." He reached for the journal, its cover battered and stained, the pages yellowed with age. "Claire's journal. I thought it might help." Tom nodded, his fingers brushing over the cover. He carefully opened the journal, revealing Claire's familiar handwriting, full of emotional turbulence. The first entry was dated just weeks before their disappearance, the words pouring out like a desperate plea. "I can't shake the feeling that something is coming. It's as if the shadows are watching us, waiting for the right moment to strike. I just want Jake to be happy, but I can't ignore this gnawing fear." Underscore, the sheriff's heart raced as he read, each line pulling him deeper into Claire's psyche. The rain outside began to fall once more, a soft patter that turned into a deluge, amplifying the tension in the air. It was as if nature itself was mirroring their unease. "Let's get out of here," Tom said, closing the journal with a click that echoed ominously in the quiet field. "We need to review this somewhere safe." Hank glanced around, the heavy clouds casting shadows over the land. "You think anyone else saw this?" "Not unless they were standing right here, but we can't take any chances. We need to keep this quiet for now." Tom's eyes narrowed as he surveyed the horizon, instinctively aware of the prying eyes of the town, even from a distance. The two men climbed into Tom's cruiser, the engine humming to life as they drove down the winding country road, flanked by dense woods that seemed to close in around them. The rain drummed against the roof, a constant reminder of the tempest that had begun so many years ago. As they turned onto the main road into town, Tom's mind raced with possibilities. The journal might hold the key to understanding Claire's state of mind before she vanished. Did she sense something was wrong? Did she know she was being watched? The thought struck a chilling chord deep within him. They arrived at the sheriff's office, the fluorescent lights flickering ominously as they entered. Inside, the walls were lined with missing persons posters, each representing a life interrupted too soon. Tom felt a pang of guilt. It was his responsibility to give families closure, and yet he had failed to do so for Claire and Jake. "Let's set up in my office," he said, leading Hank down the narrow hallway. "We need to analyze this carefully." Once inside, the two men spread the items from the box across Tom's desk. The toys, a faded action figure and a small, stuffed bear, looked innocuous enough, but they held the weight of memories long buried. The clothes, too, were reminders of simpler times, of a mother and son laughing together on sunny afternoons. But it was Claire's journal that commanded their attention. As they flipped through the pages, Hank's brow furrowed deeper. "Look at this," he said, pointing to an entry from just days before the accident. "Jake has been asking about his father a lot lately. I wish I could give him the answers he seeks, but the truth feels like a shadow that looms over us. I can see the darkness creeping in. I just want to protect him." Underscore her father. "What's the story there?" Tom asked, searching Hank's expression. "Not much to tell. He left when Claire was young. She never talked about him much, just that he wasn't around when she needed him. Maybe that's why she was so protective of Jake." Hank's voice was heavy with understanding, his own past echoing in Claire's words. Tom jotted down notes, piecing together the puzzle. If she was worried about something, it could explain why they left that night. Maybe it wasn't just the storm that drove them away. As they continued reading, a sense of dread washed over them. Claire's entries grew increasingly frantic, detailing strange occurrences that had begun to plague their lives. Late-night whispers outside their home, shadows flitting past windows, and an overwhelming sense of being followed. "I can't keep Jake cooped up forever, but I fear what's out there. It's like the woods are alive with something sinister." Underscore the sheriff shut the journal with a decisive snap, his heart pounding in his chest. "This isn't just a simple case of a mother and son getting lost. There's something far darker at play here. The town needs to know." Hank shook his head, his eyes wide with alarm. "Tom, we need to be careful. If there's something or someone out there, we don't want to provoke them. We need to gather more evidence first." Tom sighed, knowing Hank was right. The last thing he wanted was to stir the pot without understanding the full extent of what they were dealing with. But the urgency to act gnawed at him. "We'll keep this under wraps for now," he said, "but we need to talk to anyone who might have seen or heard anything that night." The rain continued to fall, a steady percussion that reminded them of the night Claire and Jake vanished. It was a relentless reminder of the shadows lurking just beyond their reach, waiting for the right moment to envelop them once more. As they discussed their next steps, Tom's mind drifted back to the other missing persons case he had uncovered, a girl who disappeared around the same time as the Thompsons. The connection nagged at him, a link that begged to be explored. What if this isn't an isolated incident? He mused aloud. What if there's a pattern? Hank frowned, the realization dawning on him. "You think there might be others? We should look into it, see if there's a connection." Tom nodded, resolve hardening within him. "We'll start with the files. If there's a pattern, we need to find it before it's too late." Just as he spoke, there was a knock at the door, breaking the tension that had thickened the air. Tom exchanged a glance with Hank before calling out, "Come in." The door creaked open to reveal Marissa, a local journalist whose curiosity often led her to the heart of the town's most sensitive issues. "I heard you guys found something," she said, her eyes gleaming with intrigue. Tom's stomach twisted. "It's not what you think, Marissa. We're still piecing things together." She stepped inside, undeterred. "You know how this town gets. If you don't share what you found, the rumors will start flying. You need to control the narrative." Hank stepped forward, a protective instinct rising in him. "This isn't just a story, Marissa. This is about real people, real pain. We can't risk spreading misinformation. But the truth needs to come out. Claire and Jake deserve to be remembered," she pressed, her voice rising with passion. Tom held up a hand to silence her. "We're not ready to share everything yet. What we found is sensitive, and we need to approach this carefully. Right now, we're focused on finding answers, not creating headlines." Marissa crossed her arms, a frown etching deep lines on her forehead. "If you don't talk to me, I'll find someone else who will. You know that, right?" As she left, Tom felt the weight of her words hang in the air. The tension in the room hung palpable, echoing the tumultuous weather outside. They were on the brink of something significant, yet the shadows of the past loomed large, threatening to engulf them if they weren't careful. As the rain continued to pour, Tom and Hank turned back to the evidence spread across the desk, the journal a testament to Claire's struggles and fears. They were determined to uncover the truth, but the journey ahead felt fraught with danger. The woods whispered secrets, and it was clear they had only scratched the surface of a mystery that had festered for far too long. With resolve, they began to chart their next moves, knowing they were no longer just searching for the past. They were also hunting the specters of the present, and it was imperative they did not become the next lost souls in the shadows of Willow Creek. The morning sun struggled to break through the heavy clouds that had loomed over Willow Creek since the discovery of the box. Sheriff Tom Reynolds stood in front of the Miller farmhouse, the cool breeze carrying the scent of damp earth and fading rain. He leaned against his cruiser, his eyes scanning the horizon where fields met the dense woods, as if the trees might reveal their secrets if he stared long enough. "Tom," Hank called, his voice barely rising above the rustling leaves. He approached with a furrowed brow, the weight of the past evident in his posture. "You think we'll find anything else?" Tom turned to face him, the resolve in his heart clashing with the uncertainty in his mind. "I don't know, Hank, but that journal, it felt like a warning. Claire was scared of something. We need to dig deeper." Hank nodded, his hands shoved into the pockets of his jeans, the fabric worn and faded like the memories they were about to unearth. "I talked to some of the old-timers in town last night. They mentioned a few odd occurrences around the time Claire and Jake went missing. Lights in the woods, strange sounds. You think it could be connected?" Tom clenched his jaw, the tension coiling in his chest. "Could be. We need to look into those reports. The more we know, the better chance we have to understand what happened." With a shared glance of determination, they made their way to the barn, the wooden structure groaning under the weight of years gone by. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of hay and machinery, the light filtering through cracks in the walls, casting long shadows across the ground. Hank led Tom to a small corner where he had found the box, its contents still fresh in their minds. As they sifted through the remnants of Claire's life, Tom felt the chill of the air seep into his bones. Each item was a piece of a puzzle Jake's toy car, a faded photograph of the two of them at a fair, and the journal, its pages filled with Claire's neat handwriting, revealing snippets of joy intertwined with growing dread. "Look at this," Hank said, pulling out a small, frayed envelope. He opened it carefully, revealing a collection of receipts and old letters, yellowed with age. "These are from the local diner. They were dated just weeks before they disappeared." Tom stepped closer, the urgency in his veins quickening. "What does it say?" Hank examined the notes, his brow creasing. "Just mundane stuff. But this one," he held up a receipt. "It's from a night when Claire was supposed to be home with Jake. She was here at the diner, having coffee with someone." "Who?" Tom asked, already feeling the weight of suspicion pressing down on him. Hank squinted at the faded ink. "It doesn't say. Just a name. M. Davis." "M. Davis," Tom echoed, the name swirling in his mind like smoke. "We need to track this person down." As they gathered the scattered contents, a sudden crack of thunder rolled through the sky, echoing ominously. Tom exchanged a worried glance with Hank. The storm seemed to be lingering in more ways than one. "Let's head back to town," Tom said, the sense of urgency growing stronger. "We need to talk to Marissa. She might know something about M. Davis." The drive back to Willow Creek felt heavier than usual, the rain beginning to fall again, drumming against the windshield like a heartbeat. Tom's mind raced with questions, each one more unsettling than the last. What had Claire feared so much? What had happened that stormy night 12 years ago? As they reached the town square, the familiar landscape felt foreign. The diner stood at the corner, its neon sign flickering uncertainly, as if it too was holding its breath. They parked and stepped inside, the bell above the door chiming softly, a stark contrast to the storm that raged outside. Marissa was seated at her usual booth, her laptop open and a cup of coffee steaming in front of her. She looked up, her expression shifting from casual interest to intense focus when she saw the seriousness etched on Tom's face. "Sheriff, Hank," she greeted them, her tone shifting. "What's going on?" "We need to talk," Tom said, sliding into the booth across from her. "It's about Claire Thompson and her son." Marissa leaned in, her eyes narrowing. "What did you find?" Tom glanced at Hank, who nodded, encouraging him to share. "We found some of their belongings, personal items that suggest Claire was scared of something. We also discovered a name, M. Davis. Do you know anyone by that name?" Marissa's face paled slightly, her brow furrowing as she considered. "I've heard whispers about Monsieur Davis. Some people thought it was a ghost story, something about lights in the woods and a figure that watched from the shadows. But I didn't think it was real." "Anything else?" Tom pressed, urgency lacing his voice. Marissa bit her lip, contemplating. "There's an old local legend. They say M. Davis was a recluse who lived deep in the woods. He disappeared a long time ago, but some say he still roams the area, drawing people in, luring them away." Hank leaned back, absorbing the weight of her words. "You think Claire and Jake were drawn to him?" Tom's heart raced. "We need to find out more. If there was a connection, it could lead us to the truth about their disappearance." Marissa took a deep breath, her eyes brightening with determination. "I can dig into it, talk to people, see if anyone remembers more about M. Davis. But you both need to be careful. If there's any truth to those stories, you don't want to awaken whatever darkness might still be lurking out there." Tom nodded, the tension thick in the air. "We plan to head into the woods ourselves. We can't let fear dictate our search for answers." As they finished their conversation, the rain outside intensified, tapping against the windows like the urgent knocking of a long-forgotten memory. The storm was more than just weather. It felt like a harbinger of the truths that lay hidden beneath the surface, waiting to be unearthed. After leaving the diner, Tom and Hank stood outside, the chill of the rain soaking into their clothes. The trees loomed in the distance, dark and foreboding, whispering secrets that had been left unspoken for too long. "Are you ready for this?" Hank asked, his voice steady but laced with concern. Tom looked toward the woods, his heart pounding with a mixture of fear and resolve. "We have to be, for Claire and Jake. They deserve to be found." With a shared nod, they turned toward the path that led into the dense thicket, the air thick with moisture and anticipation. Each step they took felt like a descent into the unknown, a venture into the shadows where the truth awaited, shrouded in darkness and time. As they entered the woods, the sounds of the town faded, replaced by the rustling leaves and the distant call of crows. The atmosphere was heavy, as if the very trees were watching, and the weight of the past pressed down on them like a shroud. Tom took a deep breath, the earthy scent of wet soil filling his lungs. "We'll find what we're looking for," he whispered, almost as a prayer, and deep down he hoped that whatever lurked in the shadows would finally reveal itself, bringing with it the answers they so desperately sought. The sun hung low in the sky as Sheriff Tom Reynolds and Hank Miller stood at the edge of the field, the remnants of Claire's backpack and Jake's shoe, a stark contrast against the rich brown soil. The air was thick with an unsettling quiet, broken only by the occasional rustle of leaves in the gentle breeze. Shadows lengthened as the sun dipped further, casting an eerie glow over the land that seemed to pulse with secrets. Tom crouched beside the backpack, his heart racing as he recalled the stories from his childhood. The Thompsons had been a ghost in the town's collective memory, a tragedy that had turned into a cautionary tale. He reached out, fingers brushing the worn fabric, feeling the weight of loss and despair embedded within it. "We need to search for more," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, as if speaking too loudly might shatter the fragile atmosphere. Hank nodded, his brow furrowed in deep thought. He felt a sense of urgency pressing down on him, a responsibility to uncover the truth. "I'll grab my shovel. I think we should dig a bit deeper." As Hank walked back to his truck, Tom felt the prickling sensation that someone was watching them. He turned, scanning the tree line. The woods loomed ominously, dark and dense, as if they harbored secrets that were better left buried. He shook off the feeling and focused on the task at hand. Together, they needed to confront the shadows of the past. After a few minutes, Hank returned with a shovel in hand, the metal glinting in the fading light. They began to dig near where the backpack had been found, the earth yielding reluctantly. With each thrust of the shovel, Tom's mind raced, replaying the details of Claire's journal. M. Davis, the figure that haunted Claire's thoughts, the one she feared might be lurking around them. Who was this person? And how were they connected to the Thompsons' disappearance? Do you believe in ghosts, Sheriff? Hank asked, breaking the silence as he wiped sweat from his brow. Tom paused, the shovel resting beside him. I believe in the ghosts of the past, he replied, his tone serious. And I think they can tell us a lot about the present. The sun finally dipped below the horizon, leaving behind a twilight that felt heavy with anticipation. The shadows shifted, and the world seemed to hold its breath. Just as Hank dug in deeper, the shovel struck something solid. Hey, I think I found something, Hank exclaimed, excitement and trepidation mingling in his voice. He cleared the dirt away, revealing a small weathered box, no larger than a shoebox hidden beneath layers of earth. Tom's pulse quickened as Hank pried the box open. Inside, they found a collection of items: a frayed photograph of Claire and Jake, a small toy car, and a faded note. The photograph captured a moment of joy, Claire's smile radiant, with Jake beside her, grinning widely, his eyes sparkling with innocence. The sight of it twisted something deep within Tom. Look at this, Hank said, holding up the note, his fingers trembling slightly. It's addressed to Sir Davis. Tom leaned closer, the darkness encroaching around them. The note read, I know you're watching. We won't let you take him from us. The words echoed with an intensity that sent shivers down Tom's spine. Who was M. Davis, and what had Claire felt compelled to protect Jake from? Do you think this is connected to their disappearance? Hank asked, his voice low, almost reverent. I do, Tom replied, feeling the weight of the revelation. The pieces of the puzzle were coming together, but the picture remained obscured, shrouded in shadows. We need to find out who M. Davis is. As the last light faded, Hank glanced at the woods, the trees now a dark mass against the night sky. Maybe we should go back to town and gather more information. There has to be someone who knows about M. Davis. Tom hesitated, glancing back at the box and its contents. I think we should take this to the station first. We need to analyze it, and we may need to alert the community. Before Hank could respond, a sudden rustling came from the woods, a sound that seemed to carry the weight of an unspoken threat. Tom's instincts kicked in. Did you hear that? Hank nodded, his face pale. Yeah, it sounded like something moved. The two men exchanged a wary glance, the air thick with tension. Let's head back, Tom urged, feeling the urgency swell inside him. They didn't need to tempt fate. The woods felt alive and not in a welcoming way. As they made their way back to the truck, the feeling of being watched returned, stronger this time. Tom glanced over his shoulder, half expecting to see a figure lurking just beyond the tree line, but the darkness held no answers, only silence. The drive back to the station was fraught with unspoken fears. Hank's knuckles whitened around the steering wheel as he navigated the winding country roads. Tom's mind raced with possibilities. What had Claire known? What had she feared? And why did it feel as though the shadows were closing in around them? Arriving at the station, the fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a harsh glare on the otherwise dim surroundings. Tom took a deep breath, steeling himself for the task ahead. They needed to involve the community, but how could they share their findings without inciting panic? Inside the station, Tom spread the contents of the box on his desk, the photograph and note stark against the polished wood. Deputy Harris walked in, her expression shifting from greeting to concern as she took in the scene. What happened out there? You look like you've seen a ghost. More like we found one, Tom replied, gesturing to the items. He explained their discovery, watching as her eyes widened in disbelief. This changes everything, she said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. If Claire was being watched, this M. Davis could be dangerous. Tom nodded, feeling the weight of her words. We need to dig deeper into this M. Davis. I want every available resource on this case. We need to find out who they are, and fast. Hank stepped forward, his voice low but firm. And we should reach out to the families of other missing persons. There might be connections we haven't considered. Tom agreed, his mind already racing with thoughts of the families left in limbo, the lingering pain of uncertainty that had haunted Willow Creek for far too long. Let's start making calls. We need to bring the community together. The more eyes we have looking into this, the better. As the night wore on, the atmosphere within the station shifted from one of despair to a sense of urgency. Each call made, each piece of information gathered, felt like a step closer to uncovering the truth. But as Tom worked, he couldn't shake the feeling that they were racing against a clock they couldn't see, with shadows lingering just beyond the edges of their vision. When the clock struck midnight, the weight of the day settled heavily on Tom's shoulders. He glanced at the photograph, Claire's smile frozen in time, a ghost of a memory that now bore the burden of a dark reality. He couldn't shake the feeling that they were on the brink of something monumental, but equally dangerous. Ish Davis, he muttered under his breath, the name echoing through his mind. Where are you? And what did you do to Claire and Jake? Outside, the wind picked up, howling through the town like a mournful spirit. Tom felt a chill creep down his spine, a silent reminder that the past was not done with them yet. The night still held many secrets, and he was determined to uncover them, no matter the cost. As the sun dipped low over Willow Creek, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, Sheriff Tom Reynolds stood at the edge of Hank Miller's field, heart racing. The weight of the discoveries pressed heavily on him, an unshakable dread curling in his stomach. The journal's entries echoed in his mind, each word a ghostly whisper of Claire's fears. What do you think happened to them, Sheriff? Hank asked, his voice low, almost swallowed by the evening breeze. He gripped the torn pages of the journal, his thumb brushing over the words as if they could offer answers. Tom glanced toward the dense woods at the edge of the field, where shadows danced like specters behind the fading light. I don't know, Hank, but whatever it wasn't just an accident. He turned back, locking eyes with the farmer. We need to figure out who M. Davis is and what connection they had to Claire and Jake. Hank nodded, his jaw clenched. I always thought it was just a tragic accident, but now? He trailed off, the implications hanging heavily in the air. The sheriff took a deep breath, the crispness of the approaching night filling his lungs. Let's head back to town. We can start by digging deeper into the records. There has to be something on Monsieur Davis in the archives. As they walked back toward Hank's truck, the last vestiges of daylight slipped away, leaving the world cloaked in twilight. The air thickened with the scent of wet earth and impending rain. A familiar foreboding that mirrored the unease settling within Tom. He could feel eyes on him, a sensation that had haunted him since childhood whenever he wandered too close to the woods. Once inside the truck, Hank broke the silence. You think the town will remember anything? It's been 12 years. I hope so, Tom replied, gripping the steering wheel tightly. There's still a lot of unresolved pain. Maybe someone saw something, or someone they've kept quiet. We need to encourage them to talk. As they drove through the winding roads, the heavy clouds gathered, thick and ominous above them. Rain began to splatter against the windshield, a rhythmic patter that mirrored Tom's anxious heartbeat. He couldn't shake the feeling that the storm was more than just a weather event. It felt like a harbinger of the revelations to come. Arriving at the small town hall, they were greeted by the flickering lights and the faint murmur of voices echoing from within. The building stood as a testament to the town's resilience, yet it felt haunted by the memories of the past. Tom stepped inside, the scent of damp wood and old paper wrapping around him like a shroud. Let's start with the archives, he said, leading Hank down the dimly lit hallway lined with photographs of community events. Each frame seemed to hold a piece of history, but none of the smiling faces could dispel the shadow of Claire and Jake's absence. They entered the archive room, filled with shelves stacked high with files and dusty boxes. Tom pulled out a large binder labeled Missing Persons and began flipping through the pages, his eyes scanning the names that had become mere whispers in the town's history. Here, he said, pausing on a name that sent a chill down his spine. M. Davis, there's a record here. It looks like they were reported missing 2 years before Claire and Jake. Hank leaned over, peering at the faded document. What does it say? Not much. Just that M. Davis was last seen in the company of a young woman and her child. It was a brief mention in a larger report about a series of disappearances around that time. Tom's voice trailed off as he felt the weight of the connection settle over them like a shroud. Could it be a coincidence? Hank asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. Tom shook his head, frustration simmering just below the surface. Nothing about this feels coincidental. We need to find out more about Monsieur Davis, who they were, what they were doing here, and why they vanished. As he continued to sift through the records, another name caught his eye, a name he recognized. "Wait a minute," he muttered, pulling out another file that had been tucked away. "This can't be right." Hank leaned closer. "What is it?" "It's a police report from 3 years ago. A witness claimed to have seen someone matching M. Davis's description near the old Thompson house." Tom's heart quickened. "And there's a mention of a confrontation with a local resident, someone who claimed they were harassing a woman and her child. But the report doesn't say who this resident was. Why would it be left out?" Hank frowned, a glimmer of understanding crossing his face. Maybe it was covered up. Maybe someone didn't want the truth to come out. The air in the room felt thick with tension. Tom could feel the walls closing in, the shadows of the past creeping closer. "We need to talk to the people who were around back then. If there's a connection, someone must know something." Just as they began to formulate a plan, the lights flickered, casting eerie shadows against the walls. Tom's heart raced as he turned toward the door, half expecting to see someone standing there, someone who had been watching them all along. "Did you hear that?" Hank asked, his voice low. Tom nodded, straining to listen. The steady drumming of the rain against the roof seemed to drown out everything else. But then he heard it, a faint rustle, like footsteps just outside. "Stay here," Tom whispered, moving cautiously toward the door. He pulled it open, the damp air rushing in, but the hallway was empty. A chill ran down his spine, the sensation of being observed prickling at the back of his neck. "Is everything okay?" Hank's voice trembled slightly. "Yeah, just a false alarm," Tom said, though he could feel his unease growing. "Let's finish up here." They returned to the archives, but the atmosphere had shifted. The air felt charged, heavy with unspoken words. As they resumed their search, Tom couldn't shake the feeling that they were not alone, that unseen eyes watched their every move. Hours passed, the storm outside intensifying, yet the town hall remained still. Finally, Tom stumbled upon another file buried beneath a stack of old records. It was brittle and yellowed, the paper crackling under his fingers as he opened it to reveal a photo of a woman standing next to a man whose face was obscured in shadow. Tom felt a jolt as he recognized the woman, Claire. The photo had to be from the days leading up to her disappearance. "Hank, look at this!" he called, his voice edged with urgency. Hank rushed over, peering at the image. "Is that—" "Yeah, that's Claire. But who is this man?" Tom's finger traced the outline of the shadowy figure. "I don't know, but we need to find out." Hank's brow furrowed as he glanced at Tom. If this man was involved, he could be the key to everything. As Tom examined the back of the photo, he noticed a date scrawled in pencil. July 15th, 2011. The very day Claire and Jake had vanished. A pit formed in his stomach as he realized how close they were to the truth. "We need to get this to the sheriff's office," Tom said, urgency propelling him forward. "This could be the break we've been waiting for." They gathered the files, racing against the storm that raged outside. Every drop of rain felt like the weight of the past crashing down upon them, urging them to confront the shadows lurking in the corners of Willow Creek. As they stepped outside, the wind whipped around them, an unsettling reminder of the storm that had once taken Claire and Jake. But now it felt like a call to action, a push toward uncovering the truth that had remained buried for too long. With determination in their hearts, Tom and Hank climbed into the truck, the engine roaring to life as they drove away from the town hall and into the encroaching darkness. The road lay ahead, winding through the trees, each turn a step closer to the answers they sought. In the shadows of the woods, the past stirred, waiting for them to uncover its secrets.